New York City mayoral candidates are campaigning for the finish line, and the race is heating up.
Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers have already cast their ballots with Election Day less than a week away.
It comes as new polling shows Andrew Cuomo gaining on Zohran Mamdani. Christina Fan joins us live from a polling place in Brooklyn Heights with more. Christina.
Mary and Chris, good morning. In the final week leading up to Election Day, all three candidates have their campaign schedules packed. Zohran Mamdani trying to maintain his sizable lead, while the other two candidates are still trying to catch up. Andrew Cuomo, high off a favorable shift in the polls, was on the attack Tuesday as he campaigned with Mayor Eric Adams. Both men laying in on Zohran Mamdani's leftist views.
He's a socialist who happens to be on the Democratic line. I'm a Democrat who happens to be on the independent line.
We need a Democrat. We don't need a socialist masquerading as a Democrat.
Cuomo once again criticized the assemblyman's short time in government and resume, which includes performing as the rapper Mr. Cardamom, and offered the ultimate put down from one Queens boy to another, saying Mamdani has
a cheesy smile.
Despite Cuomo's gains, Mamdani remains the clear frontrunner for City Hall, but he's refusing to get complacent. At a campaign event in Hell's Kitchen.
That was really funny. One of Cuomo's last-ditch efforts is to claim that him and Eric Adams are the real Democrats, and Zohran Mamdani is not a real Democrat. Okay? Eric Adams has no more fucks to give. I spent an eventful day in the soon-to-be former New York City mayor for Time. What did he say? In 2023, Adams hosted Mamdani and his father, a scholar of post-colonialism at Columbia University, for dinner. The frightening thing is he really believes this stuff, Adams tells me as he mixes the veggies. Globalize the intifada. There's nothing wrong with that. He believes, I don't have anything against Jews. I just don't like Israel. Well, who's in Israel, bro? At the dinner's end, Adams says he told the Mamdanis, listen, I just don't believe what you do. Mamdani has decried anti-Semitism, and recently, after a prolonged controversy, said he will discourage the use of loaded intifada phrase. Is Mamdani lived up now? No, man. No, he's not. I know a lot of people think that is the case, but I think the most consequential thing that he did, the most bad choice that he did, was to even back away from globalize the intifada. But he made that calculation in his mind. That obviously did not stop the attacks. That simply redirected the trajectory of the attacks to other stuff, right? But the ultimate goal was for him to continuously get smeared over and over again as an anti-Semite, a scary Muslim who was terrifying for the Jewish New Yorkers. But the other thing that he did was also saying that he was going to keep the New York Police Department commissioner in charge. Okay, those were I think two big concessions that he gave. By and large, I don't think New Yorkers are paying that close attention to it. But overall, I think I don't think he's betraying the cause or anything like that. Mamdani realizes that a more moderate Israel position is cleaner, more popular. No, that's not the case. See, this is why I actually hate that he's doing that, because this gives people the false assertion that moderating on Israel, as though his position is not the normal, most popular, overwhelmingly popular position. No, he's actually trying to clean up his image with the false assertion that New Yorkers won't see him as a scary Muslim terrorist guy, okay? If Zohran Mamdani was a white boy, the only line of attack that has been launched against him so far, which is that he's a scary Muslim who eats with his hands and stuff, would not work. And therefore, he would not actually have to take any concessions on this issue at all. They would probably call him a Nazi or a racist or something like that if he was a white boy, right? But we've seen how little that has, how little motion that has in Maine with Graham Plattner. If anything, people look at that and go, we love a quirked up white boy who actually, got a new tattoo over his previous Totenkopf. These are on the Republican side, especially brother, these are people who call Nancy Pelosi a communist. None of these words mean anything. None of these words mean anything at all. Final Quinnipiac, New York City mayoral poll by religion. None. Mamdani. plus 53, other Mamdani plus 22, Catholics Cuomo plus 2, Protestants Cuomo plus 8, Jews Cuomo plus 44. I doubt it, because when New York City Jews were polled, first of all, this disparity is so vast. This disparity is so vast in comparison to the previous past performance that Zohran Mamdani had. And also, it doesn't make sense, because when you ask New York Jews how they feel about Israel, and they have done that, they've directionally asked New York Jews how they feel about Israel. And the number of New York Jews, the percentage of New York Jews that say they sympathize with the Palestinians more than the Israelis is a higher percentage than this. This would imply that 72%, if Jews in New York were simply operating on Israel as their primary focus, which they are not, right? But even if that was the case, which is the least favorable interpretation of poll results, that would imply 72% of New York Jews are looking at Zohran Mamdani and thinking he's a major threat. Okay? Whereas, if you look at the actual polls of New York Jews, it shows that 34% of New York Jews sympathize with the Palestinians over the Israelis. And I think it's like 60+% or 60% of New York Jews sympathize with the Israelis over the Palestinians. Now, those numbers are dog shit. They're not great. Okay? This doesn't mean, this is not a good number. This is not a good number for the Jewish New Yorkers. Let's be real. But that has shown me that plenty of Jewish New Yorkers are making a calculation that they are on board with Zohran, even if they like Israel, especially when looking at the performance in the primaries for Zohran Mamdani. Okay, I think people really underestimate how powerful Hasidic Jews are in New York City, especially when it comes to political power and voting. Yeah, but even the Hasidic communities in New York are overwhelmingly conservative, but there are still Hasidic Jews that are also on board with Zohran, because Zohran has done like Yiddish campaign signs. He's gone to like the Satmar community. The Satmar community recently fucking came out and said, we're not going to endorse Andrew Cuomo. Like, it doesn't matter. Is it okay to be white and a viewer? Absolutely not. Yes, chatter. It's okay to be a white viewer. This community is majority white. Democrats bad, Republicans bad. Does not matter who you vote for. We need to be socialists or communists. Okay, saying that is just like pissing into the wind. Okay, please stop. Brother, Zohran is going to clear. I don't know why anyone would think Cuomo stands a chance. You cannot. You should be campaigning in the last week or so as though you are down 5 points, not up 20. Okay? Yeah, the extent of which the Satmar no ball and conservative and reform leaders do not is simply remarkable. Satmar Achronim leadership not endorsing Cuomo in the race for mayor. In an open letter to their followers, the leaders highlight Mamdani's gestures in outreach and prospects of him becoming mayor. It is clear that we must not fight against him. We must not wage war with him. See? Listen, brother. You don't sit on the throne of BNH. I don't want to come across as insensitive. I think it's Satmar that owns BNH, right? My goats. You don't sit on top of the throne of BNH, the domineering force of electronic brick and mortar retail, without knowing ball. Okay? The BNH empire speaks out. I do think that a lot of the outreach that Zohran did, like the Yiddish campaigning and all this stuff, played a big role in this. Straight up. Obviously, the conservative Hasidic communities, and not just socially conservative, because all the Hasidic communities are socially conservative, but the more conservative, like super pro-Israel, MAGA voter block of Hasidim are not. They were never going to be on board with Zohran. So the fact that like there's any Orthodox Jewish communities in New York that are like not openly antagonistic towards them is pretty remarkable. Anyway, the likely voter count for the Quinnipiac poll was only 911. I mean, that's a decent sample size. It's not. It's just about, guys, remember, the sample size is over 500 is going to be a decent sample size, okay? It's about the weight adjustment. Like, did they go to the appropriate demographics? Yeah, the official notice from Satmar is no endorsement, but a condemnation of the smear campaign against Zohran. Official statement from the Satmar Political Committee. After much deliberation, we have decided not to endorse any candidate. However, we feel compelled to distance ourselves from the irresponsible scare campaign and incitement against Zohran Mamdani. I think this is part because of the outreach that Zohran did directly to the Hasidic communities, and also partially because of the fact that they know ball and they are weighing their options and they are seeing that Zohran is likely going to win, so they don't want to like ruffle any feathers as well. Twitter boss staying busy right now. Yeah, I know. It's insane. My whole family lives in New York City. I live in New York City and I'm def leaving. If Mamdani wins, I'm leaving New York. I think the patches are wrong, but you know, it is what it is. I guess maybe not. The patches probably aren't wrong when you think about it, because sometimes they work. They work in the exact same way. No. Many of you will say, "Oh, it has to be IDF," but no, I think it's interchangeable. Hasids and Orthodox are widely non-Zionist, right? No. The majority of Orthodox communities are not anti-Zionist. And not all Satmar are anti-Israel, but a good amount are. Exactly. Satmar is one of the sects on the Orthodox side that is definitely more anti-Zionist than like the other Hasidic communities. Rhetoric is all anti-Zionist, whereas a lot of the other Orthodox sects are very pro-Israel. Like I would say majority of the Orthodox community in New York especially is very conservative. They're all socially conservative, obviously, but they're also very conservative in the way that they vote. Like they make up a big chunk of the straight ticket Republican voters in New York. The most religious Jews and the least religious Jews are most likely to hate Israel, like me, Lamau. I would say that the broad majority of secular Jews are pro-Israel still. You're talking about the most like agnostic atheist Jews that don't necessarily give a shit. Because like Zionism, I feel like has become a like civic nationalist religion for a lot of Jews that are not necessarily very religious, but like still like they don't even keep kosher or whatever, but they still, you know, they still have a sense of community and a sense of like shared purpose that they find by defending Israel. Yeah. Majority of secular Jews are definitely not anti-Israel. Be real. Wait, what? We are way too charitable. I never said that. I said the majority of secular Jews are not anti-Israel. The majority of secular Jews are pro-Israel. Obviously, it's different when you look at when you divide by generation. I would say that the next generation of secular Jews are not pro-Israel, but the older generation of secular Jews are certainly pro-Israel. I know you do not read positive messages as such, but just wanted to let you know that even normies like me know that you're a good person. Keep up the good work. Sending Kai love as well. Thank you, chatter. I'm a secular Jew, but like all my secularly Jewish friends are one step away from calling me an anti-Semite because I'm an anti-Zionist now. Is there proof of that? Yes. There are polls. There are polls on this stuff. It's hard to get a decent understanding of it because the definition of Zionism has been purposely kept vague, right? Like, and that's why there are silly polls like 85% of Jews say Israel is important to them, you know, is important in their life. Like, okay, that's what the definition of Zionism is? That's ridiculous. Anyway, Zohran Mamdani sat down with a popular Yiddish magazine, Their Moment, for an exclusive interview on topics important to Jewish voters. Is it possible to read online? No. Mamdani's leading the mayoral race with 43% compared to Cuomo's 33%, and Sliwa's 14% per new Quinnipiac poll. Compared to the last Quinnipiac poll, Mamdani's lost 3%, while support for Cuomo and Sliwa has stayed effectively flat. Notably, the number of undecided voters has increased. Mamdani winning Staten Island by 6 and Brooklyn by only 1. Lamau, what is this poll? I mean, that's pretty crazy. Yusuf Munayar has also noticed the same thing that I've noticed. The big uptick in Islamophobic messaging from the pro-Israel right in this moment is particularly interesting. They are absolutely petrified about softening support for Israel in right-wing Christian spaces. Their answer to this is not a pro-Israel narrative, precisely because of how toxic Israel and AIPAC are becoming, including on the right. Instead, they focus on Islamophobic narrative to try to keep the Christian right and the Zionist allied against a common enemy. This is new in right-wing spaces where previously there was not a lot of Christian skepticism over Israel, but 2 years of butchering children in Gaza seems to have changed that. Previously, in communicating to the right, Zionists used to be able to say, here's why you should love Israel. Now they just focus on, here's why you should hate Muslims. The failure to find an alternative message on both the left and the right in American politics is a sign of just how much has shifted. Let's continue.
Tuesday, he focused again on a key issue of his campaign, affordability.
For many New Yorkers, especially those, the 1 in 4 that are living in poverty, this status quo is untenable. What we can't afford is allowing this to continue.
Voter enthusiasm in the race remains high. More than 297,000 New Yorkers cast their ballots in the first 4 days of early voting, and it shows no signs of abating. Republican Curtis Sliwa, consistently trailing third in the polls, said the turnout in the race so far is a good thing.
This is a candidacy that represents people, whether they vote for me or not. I say again and again, it's the people who will pick the next mayor. I trust the people to vote.
And as an indication of just how enthusiastic voters have been, a Board of Elections map showed that 2 polling locations had wait times between 20 to 50 minutes, and another 3 polling locations had wait times of more than 50 minutes. Reporting live from Brooklyn Heights, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
That's crazy.
Christina, thank you.
So early voting is in full swing as New York City is set to elect its next mayor, and new data shows a record number of people, more than 200,000, casting their ballots so far.
Democrat Zohran Mamdani still seen as the front runner despite lukewarm support.
God damn, CNN still got some dog
his
audio.
party.
How is that possible?
We have CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton with us now. All right, Harry, put the turnout into context for us historically.
Yeah, I'll note a historic little anecdote, which was my mother voted early. If my mother's voting early, you can vote early too here in New York City. But let's take a look here at the numbers, what we're looking at so far. You know, in 2025, we're looking at, look at this, already north of 220,000. The entire 2021 campaign only had 170,000 people turn out early, and we're only 3 days into this thing. I think we might be looking at the highest turnout in the New York City mayoral election since at least 2001, which of course was a close affair between Mark Green, the Democrat, and the Republican Mike Bloomberg. And you might have to go all the way back to 1993, when of course David Dinkins, the incumbent mayor, was defeated by Rudy Giuliani, the Republican.
Harry, who do you imagine is benefiting from this high early turnout?
Oh, Boris, that is the question, isn't it? And if I was a magical person, I could tell you for sure which candidate it was. Person. I am a magical person, but not in that way. I'm a magical person in the way that I'm able to look at the camera, and a magical person insofar as my personality is absolutely fantastic. But actually telling you who it's necessarily benefiting, I'm not quite sure I can do that for you. I think there's good signs for both the candidates. Why don't we start off with a good sign for Mamdani? All right, New York City general election early voter turnout. The top increase in the boroughs versus 2021 is Brooklyn. That is where we expect and where the polling really does suggest that Mamdani is going to do quite well. He did quite well during the primary there. That is also obviously where there are a lot of folks who might agree with Mamdani's further left politics than Andrew Cuomo might necessarily have. So Brooklyn being high in the turnout, that's good for Zohran Mamdani. Now, if you're looking for a good sign for Andrew Cuomo, why don't you look at the turnout by age group? All right, this is 2025 New York City, and the largest early voting age group. In the primary, it was younger voters, those aged 30 to 30.
I'm witnessing more and more people are just obsessed with Zohran like an attractive celebrity. They are willingly ignoring his backtracking on progressive positions like Palestine liberation. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. Okay? That's it. That's all. Don't worry about it. If you're out, you're out. Okay? If you're out, you're out. That's all I got to say. Because I don't think he is backtracked. I think he's tried to re-triangulate his message, and at times he's actually stepped on landmines for no reason. But I do find it pretty crazy that people are looking at his candidacy as he is under an unimaginable amount, a metric ton of Islamophobic hatred that they are trying to repackage as like a anti-Semitic, like a wave of anti-Semitism, as they tried to like hit Zohran on this issue because he's Muslim, and then make it seem as though this is what the voters are actually fearful of, and present that as like an Israel issue. People on the left sometimes find themselves thinking, no, there is a reason for it. There's a reason for it, and that's because he's betraying his anti-Zionist roots or something.
That was the top group in terms of turnout in the early vote. Now look at this side of the screen. Look at what we have here in the general election so far.
I hate the Dem voter base. The candidates always need to be the absolute best, and check off every single box is so annoying. That's not even true. I think the Democratic voter base is a lot more forgiving of blemishes on people's track records nowadays than ever before, especially if they present a left flank position. Whereas the arguments that we're having currently is amongst the left, people to the left of Zohran Mamdani. And I would go so far as to say that the only the Dem base do not have these kinds of considerations for white people. It is very clear. Okay, they do not have these kinds of considerations for white people. The only reason why this is even a point of concern or a point of contention is because Zohran is brown. Okay, not that it matters. You have to work. You have to work on it. You have to do your very best to present your policies in spite of everything else. And Zohran Mamdani knows that. But that's it. This is something that I have talked about quite a bit. You have a much tougher go at it if you're not a white dude. That's it. That doesn't mean it's unwinnable. It just means it's harder for you. You have to be extra careful. You can't have any deal breakers, right? Zohran doesn't have any deal breakers. And yet, regardless of that, his background is the only weapon that the right forces can currently wield against him. And they're doing so. That's what they're doing.
It's actually early voters who are making up the larger share of the early vote so far. 65 to 69 is the large group. That, of course, is a group that Andrew Cuomo is expected to do very well amongst. He's expected to do poor among younger voters. So the fact that older voters are turning out to vote so far, that is a good sign for Andrew Cuomo. I won't tell you, though, which age bracket my mother belongs to, because I'm very young. She could be very young, too.
Yeah, very young. Magically.
Yeah, here. So Michael Lang had an assessment. Zohran Mamdani will win the general election, but winning is not enough. He needs a majority, 50+% of the vote. A symbolic statement of broad support spanning all of New York City's 350 neighborhoods. Here is Mamdani's path to a mandate. Get it? Mandate. Because Mamdani. Okay, sorry. Let's move on. I present to you the Commie Corridor Senior, the Commie Corridor Junior, Open Doors, the Capitalist Corridor, No King's Marchers, MSNBC Viewers, the Black Belt, the Anti-Commie Corridor, the Forgotten People, Archie Bunker's Descendants, and Swing States. Okay? These are all of the New York City's 365 neighborhoods sorted into 11 categories. The Commie Corridor Senior, the young leftist base that has reshaped New York City politics over the past decade. The Commie Corridor Junior, the next era of socialist electoral expansion. Open Doors, working class South Asian and Muslim communities, where Mamdani's opened the doors for the left. The Capitalist Corridor, the wealthiest blocks of Manhattan. The No King's Marchers, the progressive middle-aged and older voters in brownstone neighborhoods that broke overwhelmingly for Lander and Mamdani. The MSNBC Viewers, liberals who split their votes between Mamdani and Cuomo and Lander in the primary. The Black Belt, the most staunchly pro-Democrat neighborhoods in the United States of America. The Anti-Commie Corridor, heavily Republican communities with large ancestral Eastern European populations, Orthodox, Sephardic, Hasidic, Russian, and Ukrainian. The Forgotten People, lower income black and Hispanic precincts where the Democratic Party is losing support. The Swing States, neighborhoods where the margin was close between Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani in the Democratic primary and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in the presidential election. And Archie Bunker's Descendants, the dwindling pro-Trump white ethnics that once anchored New York City's electorate. Okay? That's a very funny, in my opinion, it was a very funny way to dive into this. The Commie Corridor, the young leftist base, went for Harris by 83%, Trump by 17% in the general. And the 2025 primary went for Mamdani by 66%, Cuomo for 14%, and Lander for 12%. Since the Democratic primary, the Commie Corridor, which, by the way, is Astoria, Long Island City, Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Fort Greene, Bushwick, and Bed-Stuy. Since the Dem primary, the Commie Corridor, the phrase I coined to describe Mamdani's left-leaning and youthful base, has taken a life of his own. Headlining a New York Times op-ed featuring a primetime CNN segment, receiving a citation in the New Yorker, and even a Wikipedia blurb. On June 24th, this ideological cohort, stretching from Astoria to Sunset Park, powered the Democratic Socialist Mamdani to victory with a record turnout and resounding margins. But can the new shorthand for the urban left keep up this raucous energy in November? After all, the youth are notoriously fickle, at least according to their baby boomer parents. Young people thus far have made up a smaller percentage of the electorate than in the Democratic primary, according to the data released by the Board of Elections, leaving some to question whether the Mamdani mania has worn off. I don't think so. Okay? I think there is no indication that it has worn off. That's not how these things work. If anything, there's even more momentum in the general. Okay? That's number one. Number two, Michael from Pennsylvania actually had a good assessment on this, and it's actually becoming clearer and clearer that he was right about this. He said that early voting usually tends to favor, in the first couple of days, the older demographic of voters, and then throughout the early voting, according to previous patterns, it starts moving in the direction of younger voters. Okay? And it seems he was right about this because younger voters are now increasing their turnout in the last couple of days. Obviously, there's still time. We shall see. But in a bitterly contested and higher turnout general election, the Commie Corridor will have less influence than a closed Democratic primary. Mamdani did an excellent job of maximizing his base, but how many more untapped voters are there left? The electorate estimation is 14 to 18%. Zohran needs to win almost 80% of the vote. 75% is pretty good too. What type of early voting has occurred so far? Aren't younger people more likely to go in person? I'm 21 and I went in person to vote last year. Mike was panicking today on stream that you mentioned him and you'll get him arrested, and now you're mentioning him again. Yeah. If I'm going to prison, that going to prison too, okay? Sorry. Sucks to suck. Sucks to suck, Michael. The Commie Corridor Jr., the next era of progressive and socialist electoral expansion is Bay Ridge, East Village, Hamilton Heights, Harlem, Hell's Kitchen, Kensington, Lower East Side. Harris by 79%, Trump by 21%. What happened in the general? In the 2025 primary, Mamdani got 52%, Cuomo got 28%, and Lander got 11%. Nonetheless, Mamdani's dominance in June was not confined to the neighborhoods where the socialist left had already established an electoral foothold. In expanding the political map, Mamdani broadened the left's horizons, coalescing previously unrealized gains, creating a new electorate with a mass politics campaign, and providing a winning template for future candidates of his mold. For youth and leftism is not confined to the shores of Long Island City and Greenpoint. Zohran needs to win 2/3 of the vote here. Throughout the hip and happening blocks of the East Village, Alphabet City, and the Lower East Side, Mamdani routinely eclipsed 80% of the vote. Across bustling Hell's Kitchen and gentrifying Hamilton Heights, the charismatic insurgent seldom lost a precinct. Ditto for Central Harlem, historically the black political capital of the world, where Mamdani trounced Cuomo by more than 20%. In Bay Ridge, a diversified middle-class community at the end of the R train, Cuomo won 5 precincts. Mamdani won the other 35. None of these neighborhoods, where the Democratic Socialists won handily, have any DSA elected officials. The South Asian and Muslim communities, obviously Mamdani did a pretty decent job. This is where the unks and aunties come into play. 55% is pretty good because remember, regardless of the South Asian and Muslim communities where Zohran is supposed to do fairly well because he is representative, even this breakdown shows you that there are plenty of unks and aunties that have reactionary perspectives. That's precisely the reason why Harris, who also came from this background as well, still did relatively poorly as opposed to all these other places, right? Harris got 61%, Trump got 39%. Mamdani got 55%, Cuomo got 36%. Mamdani's victory was not solely a triumph of the Commie Corridor, but underrepresented and often overlooked New Yorkers, Muslims, South Asians, rent-stabilized tenants. Now they are fulcrum of the biggest political story in the country, with cable news pundits and national magazines have been forced to learn the plight of South Richmond Hill, Jamaica, and Westchester Square. A new story bringing visibility to the lives of those often too ignored, written before our eyes. 1 year ago, these working class communities were the epicenter of the Democratic Party's failure, lost to the couch, a writing ballot, or Donald Trump himself. In the wake of Trump's victory, Mamdani's breakout moment as a candidate for mayor came from talking to the voters on Hillside Avenue in Queens, a Bangladeshi corridor that saw one of the nation's most pronounced shifts to the right. This was the start of an unprecedented level of outreach to South Asian and Muslim voters. This is where representation also plays a big role here. Okay? When people say, imagine being a Muslim and voting for Cuomo despite what he constantly says about them, you have to understand, you have to unlock a part of your brain that causes you to have a hemorrhage. Okay? If you want to understand the mindset of the median voter, you have to literally bludgeon yourself with a frying pan over and over again until you have lost object permanence. I cannot stress this enough. Okay? If you think these unks and aunties are tuned in to this election and literally hearing everything that Andrew Cuomo is saying about them, about Muslims in general, or even internalizing what Andrew Cuomo is saying or what Donald Trump was saying, for example, you're wrong. Most voters are vibes-based voters. Okay? Remember, Latinos, Latino men in particular, specifically, voted for Trump. Okay? Why did they do this? Why did they do this? Well, for a million different reasons. I've obviously relitigated this over and over again. I'm not going to get into it. But that should show you, okay? Most voters are basically barely existing, okay? They're barely surviving off of paint chips that they eat every single day. That's how you have to think about it. Most people are oblivious. That's why canvassing until the very last moment matters. Why does it matter? Because a lot more people than you think are tuning into this race. This community is the worst place to understand the mindset of the average voter. Why do I say this? Because this community was aware of Zohran when he was polling at 5%. I interviewed Zohran when he was at 5%, chat, in a crowded primary field with 16 other candidates. Do you think the average voter had heard of Zohran Mamdani? Even the average progressive voter had not heard of Zohran Mamdani at that point. Many of you encountered Zohran Mamdani for the first time in that exciting one-on-one media opportunity. We are not normal. We are not normal. We are abnormal, okay? We are abnormal. You have to remember that. At any moment, if you think the average voter is even remotely as tuned into whatever the fuck is going on in any number of different races all around the country as you are, or as we are in this community, you are wrong. You will find yourself in the throes of delusion, okay? This is also the reason why I always say you got to dial it back when you're talking about certain issues, when you're talking about certain things, or when you disparage candidates immediately if they like marginally change their position in the direction of like the median voter somehow. Okay? Yeah, there are multiple canvassers of Zohran saying they still barely knew who he was, and they're just tuning into all this now. Of course. Of course. Even when you have 100,000 door knockers, like Zohran does, 50,000 in the primary, which was an impressive number, 100,000 in the general, which is unimaginable, right? For a mayoral race, there are still going to be plenty of people who are oblivious. Okay? That's it. I still remember when he was sub 10% of my group in Grand Army Plaza were Chapo Trap House fans, Gramlo fans, and Hasan Abi heads. Yep. Once I'm done with this video, I'm going to get into the mindset of a median voter so you understand.
Young, even. Right? So, see what I did there? Okay, Mamdani, though, he's still the favorite?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you can see it in the prediction markets right here at this particular point. What do we see? The top chances to win New York City mayor, according to the Cal.
I cannot tell you how much I despise the fact that CNN and all these other outlets unironically refer to the prediction betting markets, which are incredibly susceptible to market intervention. By I can't believe it. This doesn't show anything, please.
Your prediction market odds. Look, Mamdani has an 86% chance. Andrew Cuomo comes in at 14%. I will say Cuomo's up a little bit from where he was yesterday, but the bottom line at this particular point is Zohran Mamdani is driving the subway car. He's driving the bus. He's not driving the car because, of course, most people in New York City actually commute via mass transit or by walking. They don't drive their cars. So at this particular point, Mamdani is the favorite. Andrew Cuomo's got a shot, perhaps a little bit up from where he was just a few days ago. But at this point, Zohran Mamdani is in the driver's seat, guys.